Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well this evening. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, which is a critical look at Canada's role abroad. I'm Yves Engler, coming to you from Georgiage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And lots of developments in Canadian foreign policy again. This week. So I'll get right to it. There's a letter signed by 29 Canadian civil society organizations and unions opposing the Canada-Ecuador Free Trade Agreement, which is being negotiated, finalized right now, being discussed right now. There's a story about the tar sands and how there's improvements in efficiency again last year. But despite the fact that each barrel they've been able to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions per barrel, the total uh, greenhouse gas emissions are still going up, and it went up from 80 up to 80.1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide from 78.8 in 2022. So been getting more efficient, but sucking out more. So we're still contributing even more. Tar sands is this huge source of Canadian contribution to the climate crisis that is facing humanity. The Anita Anand met with her French counterpart again, and again talked about the deep and historic partnership rooted in their commitment to democracy, multilateralism, and economic progress. As I mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, similar kind of statement. Um, they've never said Canada has long talked sort of about France being an ally or sharing common values alike, but has never or only once ever, as far as I know, in the history of Canadian foreign policy, ever even alluded to the horrible debt, the outrageous debt of independence, ransom of independence that France forced Haiti to pay, that they should be repaying Haiti something in the range of 40 billion. Some estimate New York Times says, I believe, is 115 billion was the New York Times estimate, somewhere between 40 and 115. Um, the um, I'll oh God, I'm totally blanking on his name now. I didn't write the name down. Jabara, um, former transport minister Omar Al Al Jabara, I believe. He he just got a position with he left the government. I don't know when. I guess the last election he didn't run again. He just got became vice president public infrastructure for Bechtel Canada. So he was important player in he became the special envoy on Syria, and he had quite a bit of dealings in the Arab world. He and so now he's going to have a position with Bechtel. I don't know if it's directly tied to, his role in the transport minister or if it's the foreign policy side of things, but it just shows you like what happens with government, and you get these cushy jobs in vice president public infrastructure with this big Bechtel, of course, was heavily involved in the occupation of Iraq after the 2003 U.S. Invasion. The Auto Citizen today has a piece about DND says F-35 review will be completed in the summer. But basically, it's the military looking at reviewing a question that they've already answered. They want the F-35. What Puglisi points out is they're not committing to even releasing the final report. So we're not got a date. We just have the summer, but they're not committing to releasing the final report. And Puglisi was kind of framing it as well. Again, this sort of the military's already said they want the F-35, so they're going to try to figure out a justification for that, is the likely scenario. I ended up on Maxime Bernier's Twitter for the first time in months or maybe a year or so, because he posted this really racist comment about people think they're on temporary foreign workers who they referred to them as parasites. And anyways, I looked at his Twitter a little bit, and what I find interesting is he's very objectionable, odious, and often just openly racist uh, positions on a bunch of things. But I don't agree with, like, 90, seems like 98% of his positions. But he is the only major politician that said so. What, not long ago, about a week ago, I think it was. He said the risk of an escalation in the Ukraine war is dangerously increasing. I have been calling for Canada to stay out of this pointless proxy war of Western neocons against Russia since March 2022. Western countries should stop supporting the Ukrainian war effort and instead let Zelensky negotiate whatever peace deal he can. Russia is not our enemy, and this is not our war. Now, I wouldn't formulate exactly how he formulates it, but I essentially agree with the broad outlines of what he's saying, and it's fascinating that he is the only politician. I mean, he doesn't really have a big standing anymore, but he was the former foreign minister, and he was an MP for quite a while. Um uh, so that's yeah, just kind of fascinating. Um, and on the well, I guess I'll leave that for a second. There on the India, the Carney invited Modi to the G7, which got a certain amount of pushback because, of course, it's not long ago that they are accused of assassinating a Sikh activist in Surrey, in Vancouver area, uh, and so it goes a little bit against some of the whole foreign interference kind of brouhaha. Uh, I wouldn't personally have invited Modi. Uh, I don't think in the scope of things, scheme of things, I don't know that it's the worst thing. At the end of the day, it's the most populous country in the world. Uh, I don't know. The G7 is a pretty illegitimate entity about, maintaining the wealth of the historic colonial uh, and, current leading imperial forces, having the most populous country there. I don't like Modi's politics on a whole bunch of fronts. I don't, know that much about his politics, but the broad outline of what I understand, I'm not very sympathetic to his politics. But anyway, so I think that to some extent there would be I wouldn't have invited him, but in the balance, I don't like there was a fair bit of backlash to it, and I'm not sure that how you exactly navigate that on balance, but there was backlash to it. Now, there's a couple of interesting things on this. So Stephen Harper made did a speech at some Indian forum, I think more Hindu forum. I'm not sure exactly what the forum was, and it was this big speech about sort of a pro-India speech. He's very close with Modi through the conservative right-wing party alliance that Harper, I think, may still be heading up, or was until not that long ago. And a lot of people view this as a sort of somewhat of a criticism of Polyev. And there's a piece in the National Post by, I think it's John Ivison, and I think it's titled "Conservatives Not Heeding Harper's India Warning." And it just goes through the sort of how many Sikhs were put in kind of positions of influence within the Conservative Party, and many candidates, and they did quite well in the election, and kind of going through this sort of just basically a ethnic analysis of how Polyev is kind of positioning himself on India and specifically with regard to the Sikh community in Canada. And what I found fairly interesting about it, and I don't know, it's all correct. I presume the facts are more or less as stated. Um, uh, but what I find it is that there's no way. Basically, he's trying to say that Poilievre's given all this outsized role to the community, and because they show sort of ability to vote en masse and stuff like that. And if you would have done the same piece on the Jewish community, it would just be completely outside of bounds, right? It would just be viewed as completely tropes. And of course, the Jewish community is far more powerful than the Sikh community is in Canada, even if it is a well-organized community, and for its fairly small size, that it punches above its political weight, and certainly more than other racialized communities. Um, so that is kind of an interesting piece, and but of course, uh, Carney's decision to invite Modi kind of went against the World's Sikh Congress, criticized it and stuff like that. Now, the front page of today's Globe is all about how Carney says he's going to hit the 2% of GDP on military spending by next year. And then today he made some declaration at the Monk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto about hitting this 2%. And it seems like the details that I saw in a CBC story was that it's at 45 billion right now in military spending. They're going to add 9 billion, which is a major increase in 1 year. And that's, of course, forever, right? And then they're going to bring the Coast Guard under DND, and they're going to make some other changes that basically are effectively accounting kind of changes that get up to 2%. So it's already increased. It was already projected planned increase from, I think, about 41 billion to 45 billion, something like that. Plus, they're going to add 9 billion more. So this is some, serious amount of money, and they're going to get us towards, I think, Canada's GDP is about just over 3 trillion. So 2% would be about 60 million. I don't think it's going to hit quite that from the numbers I saw. They're saying they are, whether they get there exactly. Now, this is all happening before this NATO summit that is taking place at the end of the month, or more, I guess, in 2 weeks. And where they're talking about 5% now, it seems committed, 3.5 hard military, and 1.5 of other things that can be identified as sort of security or military related. Somewhat of an accounting game that seems to be going on with the other 1.5, but 2% is already this huge increase. I mean, when Harper left, it was at about 1% of GDP. Mexico, my understanding is Mexico something around 0.7% of its GDP on military spending. Of course, there's a couple dozen countries that don't have a military. They would have some degree of Coast Guard and policing services, so 2% is a big increase. It's a major increase. Today, I tried to ask. I went to this press conference. I wanted to ask two different questions. I'll get to the second one later, but it was the Minister of Social Solidarity. It was an announcement, a $3.5 million Quebec government announcement for kind of like well, I guess street intervention workers to deal with people who are either unhoused or sort of precarious, specifically in the Quartier du Spectacle, the sort of tourist area, the neighborhood of spectacles, neighborhood of concerts, I guess would be the translation. And so I asked the minister, like, do you have any comment on, she talked about this part of a $4 billion kind of itinérance, street people kind of initiative, sort of, so welfare spending kind of stuff. Anyway, so I said, like, at that point, I thought it was going to be towards 20 billion in new military spending, according to the Globe. Globe was saying it's 15 to 20 billion. in increased military spending. It now looks like it might be a little bit less than that, and there's going to be some sort of accounting games going on. But nonetheless, these, $3.5 million is absolutely nothing compared to even the 9 billion that seems to be on the table, plus whatever more would come if Canada tries to go towards the 3.5%. Um, uh, and I was blocked from that question. But I think we do. There was a demo in England, "Welfare, not warfare," I think was their main slogan, about these huge cutbacks or the huge increase in military spending in England and the cutbacks in social programs. I think we do need to start really foregrounding that, especially when you see, I mean, communities are being, people are fleeing in the tens of thousands from the forest fires. And this is what Carney had to say today, in announcing this huge increase in military spending. Threats which felt far away and remote are now immediate and acute. Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine, and then goes on, but it's not all Moscow, increasingly assertive China. So threats which were felt far away or remote are now immediate and acute. I would say the people fleeing their homes from forest fires would think that was the case with the climate crisis. The forest fires aren't, directly, or it's not like there was never any forest fires before the climate crisis, but clearly being exacerbated. And yet that just kind of gets left out of the whole discussion. Now, Carney today, again, in justifying military spending, talks about China, assertive China. But simultaneously, there's a lot of talk about how Carney is kind of resuming high-level contact and is sort of reaching out with China, which I find a little bit interesting, a little bit contradictory, probably more or less true within the box of the sort of U.S. empire, the hyping of China. Carney is trying to maintain the element that is the most important element to him and the people who he represents, which of course are the corporations who would like to, even if there's lots of political hostility, to maintain profit-making endeavors and trade relations, etc. And so I assume what he's doing is trying to figure out the way of navigating the sort of get tough on China official discourse with a sort of business as usual or even expansion of business kind of dynamic. Mander Sidhu, who is now, I believe, the international trade minister, he has a post which I thought is always interesting. You don't see it as much anymore. He posts in a tweet. He ends it off with saying, "The world wants more Canada, and we are ready to deliver." So that whole old line of the world, needs more Canada, wants more Canada, whatever. You see that less and less. Interestingly, I would say that was more. Trudeau tried to restart that. We're back, or whatever the famous statement he made on the night of the election night. But I feel like you see a lot less of it. Harper shifted that a bit. The loss of the Security Council, I think, shifted it. The backing of the genocide in Gaza has made that even harder to believe in sort of left liberal circles, which it was mostly designed for. It's not really a slogan designed for the right. The right kind of sort of says we want less to do with the world. There's a sort of xenophobic nationalism there. So you're seeing less of that. Nonetheless, saying now, converse to that is Mark Garneau died this week, and 76, died of cancer. He, of course, was famous for being an astronaut. He was a former Canadian military officer, and he was transport minister for quite a few years, and then he was a foreign minister. He was a foreign affairs critic for the Liberals for a period, I believe, maybe about a year or so before they won in 2015. And then he was foreign affairs critic or foreign affairs minister for about like 10 months in 2021. I did a piece that looked into Garneau's foreign policy. Now, of course, you have just like endless, the greatest guy in the world, just tried to help the world. They would quote kids from the Mark Garneau named schools. he's just trying to help the world, da 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 da. Da. It's all like it's kind of formulaic. And there's something to be said for, don't say bad things about what's the saying, people who've died don't say bad things. But politically speaking, it does, like it can't just be one-sided and oh, the greatest, because it is all part of this myth making of Canada and the world, right? And I don't think foreign policy was central to most of the discussion of Garneau, but it was there. And as I talked about in the piece, I mean, Garneau on the Columbia protests, a huge amount of killing, and he, refused after multiple protests from groups, Colombian Canadian groups, finally sort of criticized both the right-wing government responsible for killing about 50 and the protesters. Um, on Haiti, he was in charge in an important period when there was mass demonstrations, when Jovenel Moïse extended his mandate, already a dubious mandate, and then he just extended it in a flagrant violation of the Constitution. And we did this public letter, probably the best, most prominent sign-ons ever for a public letter on Canada Haiti. Got like three sitting MPs, number of former MPs, prominent people, Chomsky, yeah, I think Stephen Lewis might have signed that one, Naomi Klein, people like that. And we delivered it to his office, and then right away after, and it was not just there was Haitian community, there was a demo Haitian community at his office, and there was a bunch of unions, civil society groups in Canada, in Quebec, that were calling on Garneau to shift gears, and his response was to meet with Blinken and basically double down on Moise. Now you look back on that and you say, well, Moise gets assassinated, and then things just completely unravel. If that popular protest that was, particularly in Port-au-Prince, it was massive. It was 100,000 plus demonstrating, and there was these big strikes that had been, if Moise goes, if the core group, if Ottawa and Washington don't prop him up, who knows where things go. So, let alone go back in history to the coup d'etat of 2004, broader Haiti history. In that specific moment, if Moise goes, the PHTK's out, because of popular protest, not because of a PHTK power struggle with more thuggish elements assassinating him. Who knows, right? What happens, right? I mean, considering the situation now, certainly that's should be looked at seriously. And Garneau was foreign minister during that period. Now, of course, individuals are not actually that important in Canadian foreign policy. There's clearly underlying structures, institutional prerogatives that make the transferring of ministers. But in that kind of situation, that is a situation where it's not implausible if you had like a Lloyd Axworthy, the left end of the Liberal Party foreign policy, which is not very left, of course. If you had a Lloyd Axworthy in that position, could they have maybe done something a bit different? Was there enough kind of push in the Haitian community, in broader civil society? I don't know, maybe. So the individual, maybe could have gone in a bit of different direction and helped in aligning with the popular movement rather than undermining it. Nonetheless, and then in the piece I did, Garneau, the main thing, Garneau was a real deep anti-Palestinian, and he wasn't just a deep anti-Palestinian as foreign minister, as transport minister, and before that, he went on a whole bunch of pro-Israel tours of Israel, pro-Israel lobby group tours of Israel, and about 6 months ago, when he did his book launch at the Bibliothèque Nationale, about 5 or 6 blocks from where I live. I went and asked him after the event if he felt bad about having sent a letter to the International Criminal Court pressuring the ICC not to investigate Israel in 2021. Now that Israel's committing genocide, and he didn't want to talk about it at all, and he kind of embarrassed himself because he does this whole thing. It's this book's this is not a political event, and it's like more science event. This is astronaut whatever. And I'm like, well, this is a book launch, and your book's partly about your time in politics. And he sort of kind of begrudgingly admits that yes, that's true, but I don't want to hear your question, basically, and then goes to the guy next to him and tries to get security on me. But so he was deeply anti-Palestinian, Garneau, more than his writing, the Westmount that he covers in part. It has a, it's not a huge Jewish. It's not, it's not as big as obviously Housefathers writing or but it's maybe the second biggest, maybe in Montreal. I don't know actually if NDG kind of Westmount area that he covers, Anglo Western Montreal. Um, in so Mark Carney has made all kinds of. I'll get into a whole bunch of things he said on Palestine in the last days. Whole bunch of bad stuff. I'll get to that in a second here. But today, in his speech, according to the National Council of Canadian Muslims, he said, "This is the security, the funding, military funding thing." He said, speech. He said, "When we stand up for territorial integrity." Whether it's in Ukraine, in West Bank, in Gaza, we are also standing up for the territorial integrity of the Canadian Arctic. Um, I think that's a very interesting quote. Now, he said something similar during the election in a French a Radio-Canada interview. Why I highlight this quote, and he obviously doesn't mean it, uh, because as I pointed out on the NCCM post, are you going to send, is he going to send some of these weapons that he's purchasing? Is he going to send some of the soldiers he's expanding to defend against annexation in Gaza? Of course not. So he doesn't really mean it. He is willing to do that with Ukraine because that fits into a NATO proxy dynamic. Nonetheless, while it's fake, the nationalist rhetoric, the underlying nationalism there I think is quite threatening to pro-Israel groups. And they don't like that. They don't like associating and Trump annexation, West Bank, this is it's just this is slightly different than what he said in the Radio Canada interview, but nonetheless, that same dynamic of associating those things, that's very dangerous from a pro-Israel standpoint, which of course has always been part of Canadian nationalist ideology, Zionism has been. And this type of rhetoric undercuts that. Uh, Not even though, of course, it's really it's all he's not serious about any of this stuff. Um, so on the Israel front, Carney went to the Nova exhibit yesterday, or he posted about it, I think earlier today, maybe that was last night. And he also posted about a couple days ago about Judith Weinstein, the remains of this Israeli, her and I think her husband. They got the remains of them. Everyone knew they'd been killed 20 months ago. But our prime minister decided he was going to post about this 20 months later. It was so important. Now, of course, about I think it was 95 people that were killed in the 24 hours before he posted about that, and however many more have killed 50 kind of every day since, and no post about that. Kids being incinerated, no post about that, but post about the remains of somebody who has a Canadian connection from 20 months ago. So it's just all part of that rhetoric or the enabling and the racism, the just utter double standard when it comes to Israeli versus Palestinian lives. Um, Now, it was about 3 weeks ago now, on the March or May 19, that there was the UK, France, Canada statement threatening some degree of sanction. Not much seems to have gone on that. There was a response that he was asked it in French, and if there's going to be any developments, and he said it's not the moment today. We will make decisions when we make decisions. So he's refusing to move forward. He's still stalling. Um, there was a report in the Israeli paper based upon they're saying a Saudi television station claiming that France, Britain, and Canada have set preconditions for the Palestinian Authority and Hamas for the recognition of a Palestinian state. So it's greater democracy within the PA, reforms within the PA, and demilitarization of Gaza, and Hamas, I guess, not having political power in Gaza. I don't know if this is true. It would be interesting to see if if those three countries uh, recognized Palestine together, it would matter. Mostly, it's all just a sort of fake symbolic, and of course, putting conditions on on the Palestinian Authority. I mean, the Palestinian Authority is such a joke. It's such a a foreign-backed, Israel-backed entity. Um, but anyways, we'll see where that goes. The Maple said that there was Canada sold 18.9 million of military goods to Israel despite the pause last year. That's, of course, just the direct sales. Most of the sales go via the US, but nonetheless, it just kind of confirms that the Liberals were lying, which we knew. The CJPME got into a bit of a dust up with the CBC, and they did an action alert. And I guess there was a bit of an error in action alert. The Power and Politics um, anchor that day was not David Cochran, who was the normal guy. It was somebody fill in, and they got the name wrong. And I guess there was emails, and there was a real. The CBC people said that they claim they've gotten these nasty emails. CJPME doesn't have evidence of that, and and then the CJPME or the CBC went hard at CJPME. And David Cochran, who I shared his video of me asking him, I guess about a year ago, I think it was a Liberal Party ministers meeting at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. I bumped into him just outside in the mall, just next to that, and asked him the double standards on the language he uses. It's the massacre that Hamas committed October 7th, but he never uses similar words describing Israel. And basically, the main point here that the story on the grind and the CJPME highlight is that they asked the CBC if they've ever responded in this kind of aggressive tone to Honest Reporting Canada, and the CBC went silent. So presumably no, right? And so here you have Honest Reporting Canada for many, many years, just these onslaughts, and the media outlets are very deferential. And then you have CJPME try to sort of copy Honest Reporting Canada in their model, and get these emails sent. They make a little error. It's really not a I guess for Cochrane himself, it's a little annoying that you weren't even actually the anchor and you're getting some criticism of it. Okay, I get that. That's fair enough. But it's in the big picture, it's not a particularly big error that they made, and the CBC goes hard at them on this. And it just it speaks to this is how the media they're deferential to power, right? They're deferential. And Honest Reporting Canada is a FLAC organization that has all this power behind them, and that's why they're so effective. Is because they have all these Israel lobby organizations behind them, because they have those wealthy pro-Israel donors that are behind them. The Bronfmans, the Tannenbaums, the Schwartz, etc. And they have the U.S. empire behind them. They have They have all these power forces behind them, and so that's why they are effective. And I think the reaction to CJPME by CBC really kind of highlights how they're aggressive with the weak, those just defending the people being slaughtered in Gaza. In the National Post, there was a piece by Leslie Roberts. Okay, so Leslie Roberts is the brother of Rob Roberts, who is the head of the National Post. And so Leslie Roberts and Rob Roberts, I might not be Rob, think it's Rob, yeah. They went on this trip to Israel, paid for by the Exigent Foundation, which is headed by this pro-Israel wealthy person. And so he publishes, Leslie, the brother, publishes a piece in the National Post, headline: Media Fall for Hamas's Fiction. And in this story, he said, I saw firsthand how misinformation spreads during a recent trip to Israel, sponsored by the Exigent Foundation, where the IDF now serves not only as a defense force, but also as a real-time fact-checking unit, challenging falsehoods as quickly as they emerge. So, according to this Leslie Roberts, the IDF is the is a fact-checking unit. So they are the killers and the fact checkers. And this is this is the bemoaning the media being unfair to Israel. That's what the brother of the head of National Post on an Israel lobby sponsored trip to Israel has to tell the world. You can't make this stuff up, really. Honestly, these people are just unhinged. It's just like the more killing, the more unjustifiable everything Israel does, the more hysterical these people become, the more outlandish. The front page of the Montreal Gazette was, I can't go back to old life, says former Hamas hostage. Takes out most of the front page of the Montreal Gazette. Former Hamas hostage, oh, I have to the struggle, the whatever. It's just, this is the front page of the Montreal Gazette. So I don't know if other post media is quite as bad. But it's just unbelievable. 20 months into this Holocaust, and really Israel is the victim. The in the National Post, Conrad Black has another one of these just insane pieces. When the UTFA, which is the University of Toronto Faculty Association, rams through discriminatory measures. This is talking about a vote on boycotting companies that are helping Israel's genocide. Discriminatory measures with less decorum than a meeting of a chapter of the recently of the Ku Klux Klan, and in approximately the same racist spirit. It is not only time to worry, but time to take countermeasures, as is happening in the United States. So this meeting of the U of T faculty, it's like a KKK meeting. Of course, it's trying to stop a Holocaust by a European supremacist movement that's been stealing their land for 100 years. This is what appears in the Globe or in the National Post. I'm going to speed through a few things here. So this week, in a sort of good news with a bit of bad news story, I think, it came out, the Toronto Star reported that the RCMP began some sort of investigation into Israel. It's not clear exactly what. It was a pretty sparse article. The Toronto Star reporter highlights how they kept quiet about, apparently it began in early 2024. This was the first time it became public. It was the War Crimes Program, so which does the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act. And the inference in the Toronto Star article was it was investigating dual. It wasn't stated this, but this was what I took from it. And then Israel sources went further with this, was that it was basically looking at Canadians who fought in the Israeli military, or Israelis that are in Canada fought. And it kind of contrasts with what happened in Ukraine and how they went public. The RCMP went public right away and kind of pushed it. Now, this blew up. The Israeli media, went all over the Israeli media. Jewish Zionist media picked it up widely, and there was obviously a big pushback. The Housefather has a meeting with the RCMP to try to pressure them against it. The special envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism, Deborah Lyons, has a meeting, participates either in the meeting with Housefather, has a different meeting. It's not exactly clear to me. Where she's trying to pressure the RCMP to, not investigate. It's not exactly clear what they were doing or not doing. She comes out with a statement saying there's been a clarification. The RCMP comes out with a statement, clarification, and sort of back away from the idea, which some Israeli media start pushing pretty aggressively, that they were investigating dual nationals. We don't know that. RCMP seems to be basically denying that. That doesn't mean that's not true. Now, there's a bit of a debate on this. Like Dimitri Lascaris published a piece and then a video really attacking this idea, saying it's all just theater, and kind of dismissing it all. I'm not really of that opinion. I think this does matter. I think putting out there, even just knowing that this is a possibility to investigate Canadians or Canadian Israelis for war crimes against and crimes against humanity act is actually a step forward. I actually believe the RCMP probably was looking at some of this under pressure from CJPME, under pressure from, I mean, I've been talking about this a lot, under pressure from different other groups. I don't think that they were ever serious, and clearly the RCMP has been engaged in giving impunity, or avoiding Canadian laws when it comes to Israel, specifically around the Foreign Enlistment Act, and specifically in late 2020, early 2021, they refused to deal with the evidence that we presented to them on that, and so they've kind of been part of this broader legal exceptionalism for Israel. And so, and the RCMP's, do Operation Proteus, they do that operation, which is tied with Americans and the Israeli Shin Bet, to make a Palestinian security force to oversee the occupation. There's actually a good article about that this week that I posted to my Twitter account. But so nonetheless, I think this is a step forward. I think that it puts a bit of fear into pro-Israel forces. This is a possibility. I think that rather than just being this sort of blanket dismissal, it's all just theater. I think this is more of an opportunity to push on. There was an action alert in that direction. I broadly agree, mostly agree with Dimitri's line that it's scandalous that they haven't acted. It's scandalous that they didn't announce this publicly right away. There's all kinds, but nonetheless, I think this is a small advancement in terms of challenging the impunity for Israel and Canada, and puts the Zionist movement a bit on the back foot. Now, the special envoy intervening here is just outrageous. Okay, here you have this. There's a police investigation. So first of all, it's questionable in terms of trying to political influence in a police investigation. That right away. She's not an MP or a minister, but she is the special envoy, has this government position and funded by the government, etc. And it's scandalous that she would try to basically exempt Canadian genocidaire from Canadian law. I mean, that's essentially what she's doing, and framing this all as anti-Jewish. This is like Lyons has gone so far down the path. She's gone so far away from the ostensible mandate of combating racism to being just this aggressive advocate for the Holocaust in Gaza. And this bid to exempt Canadian genocidaire from Canadian law is a pretty outrageous example. And I did a piece this week about this. And I think I coined this term. I'm not sure, and I don't know. It's kind of a little bit goofy, but I think it also has some degree of political utility, which is the anti-Semitism industrial complex. And in this article, I just detail I don't know, 15, something like that, different sort of groups that are basically fighting anti-Semitism, and a whole bunch of, and I know there are more. I've obviously seen some of these pop up. I hadn't consolidated them all in one place, and I sort of do a bit of this in the article, and I'm sure there's others I missed because I didn't spend that much time tracking them down or reminding myself of them. But so the special envoy is just one of those. And this week, the Canadian Jewish News is a piece about the Montreal Holocaust Museum. And they're setting up this initiative to try to like they're basically saying there's like a lack of research on anti-Semitism, Holocaust in Quebec, and they want more French language research on this. And they sort of had this conference a couple of days ago or a week ago or something, and to deal with this, and some academics got some initiative, the UCAM and the academic to do this, and da 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 da. Now, the main speaker that they invite, who I forgot to write her name down, she's this Hebrew University prof who also has a position at the Sciences Po in Paris, the well-known French university, and she's just like really aggressive. She's a liberal Zionist. She's not a Netanyahuist, but she's like a really aggressive proponent of the genocide. She's been defending it, in a more sophisticated kind of way, but she's been defending it for the last 18, 20 months. This is who the museum, and she's got a book, basically recent book, and apparently I haven't read it, but it's all about like the widespread anti-Semitism on the left. It's not a new argument. And she said in one interview I saw, she says it's worse than the previous form of anti-Semitism, right? I mean, these people are just like, they are Holocaust deniers, right? I mean, the worst, even if you believe all of the most fanciful stuff on accusations of anti-Semitism against the left, even if you believe all of it, it's still like, inconsequential next to, 6 million killed by the Nazis anyways. But this is the kind of stuff that this person, and this is the Montreal Holocaust Museum promotes, right? And they've been promoting, I've detailed all this, and they've been going back, this goes back many, many years, decades even. They are an ideological stick for Zionist crimes. That's what the Holocaust Museum principally functions as. And there's a whole, anti-Semitism industrial complex, if you want to use that term, that's doing that, right? And Deborah Lyons, of course, is probably the most egregious example, or one of the most egregious examples. But it's now the Holocaust monument in Ottawa apparently last night was vandalized, and it's not like I saw the images. It says like feed. I think it's trying to be pro-Palestinian. I don't understand what they exactly are saying. It's not offensive. There's nothing anti-Jewish in what they're saying. And it's just like blowing up, right? Like Carney has posted about it, and Guilbeault, who's a culture minister, it says what's the word he uses? Strongly condemns. He's never strongly condemned the 100,000 killed over the past 20 months, but he's strongly condemning. And I've asked him probably a dozen times to strongly condemn, and he stays silent. And so there's a whole like brouhaha. Now, what I responded to Carney's thing is I'm appalled by this defacing of this vandalism. I'm appalled that the Israel lobby uses Nazi Holocaust from 80 years ago to justify Israel's ongoing Holocaust. That's what I'm appalled by. And it's just, and this gets into whole, like, you can't talk about Israel Palestine without talking about the domestic side, and the domestic side is so intertwined with with the anti-Semitism discussion. And so there's all these pro-Palestinian types, particularly Jewish people. I'm writing a story about Martin Lukash. I talked a bit about that last week. The editor of The Breach. They never talk about this. They don't confront any of this. This is a incredibly important part of this whole picture. The killing in Gaza is directly connected to how the Holocaust monuments, and I wrote a piece back when the monument, it was Tim Uphall, conservative MP, back in 2010, that proposed the private members bill that passed unanimously to do the monument. And he was open about the Israel side to it. He was open about it. He talked about going to Israel. He talked about reinforcing his idea of doing this, going to Israel, and he went on a visit with the Canada-Israel Committee. I mean, it's just like, it's not, there's no denial that the Holocaust monument is directly connected to Israel. that's just part of the people who sponsored it. That's what they, and not to mention the Israel lobby types, but the politician that did it. He said it, and yet there's crickets, right? Who's come out and said we shouldn't have this monument? Funny, the only person I saw that Amira Haas in Haaretz 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years ago, I don't know when, she pointed out that there's this Holocaust monument in Ottawa, but there's no, at that point, I think it might be now, but there wasn't a monument to Indigenous people in Ottawa, right? So you have about the Nazi crimes in Europe, but nothing about Canada's crimes and dispossession, historic and ongoing, of First Nations. Um, yeah, a couple. I guess I mentioned doing the Greta stuff. Um, the flotilla was seized in international waters. Greta Thunberg came to Canada in 2019. She met with Trudeau here in Montreal. Huge demo. The mayor Valérie Plante gave her a key to the city. Today, I went and asked. That was the other thing I was asking at this press conference. The city councilor and member of the executive committee of Projet Montréal, the same party that gave Thunberg the key to the city back 6 years ago. I asked if he had any comment on her being kidnapped, and he just like I walked with him like 2 minutes. I tried to ask it at the press conference, but I was blocked from my other question, so I couldn't ask it at the press conference, but outside I try to ask it, and I walk with him like two and a bit minutes, and he just baffles on about how you got to set up an interview properly. I mean, I was just at the press conference, and they didn't want to let me ask it there. Then he doesn't want to answer it on the street. But then his media flack kind of the end didn't really want to say no to it either. I think Persian Marielle has a sort of whatever, a leftish pretense, and so they still know that Thunberg and the Palestine question is important, but they didn't want to answer it. And this is what you see all across the liberal. There's Alison Haynes in the Montreal Gazette. This is one I talked about. I don't know. I talked about the talk I gave 10 days ago or so. But she's this like liberalish, big on climate stuff. A fan of Thunberg back in 2019. Front page piece in support of the demo, all this kind of stuff, and just like a big support of Amnesty International. But when Amnesty says it talks about apartheid and Israel's life and genocide, when Thunberg criticizes Israel, total silence, right? They like her. They like her when it's about the climate stuff, and then they just they ghost her when it's about Israel's Holocaust in Gaza. This week, there was a ruling, mostly kind of a technical legal ruling, but the appeals court that the Jewish National Fund tried to get overturned their revocation of charter status. They rejected it. It was mostly saying you just don't. It's not the jurisdiction. It wasn't really on the substance of it. But this is now 2 defeats by the JNF in the legal recourse. They've tried a whole bunch of them. They got 1 or 2 more attempts coming up, but they have been defeated, and it's a good sign. Each time it's also good to talk about the JNF having lost the charitable status, but also it's a intro to the whole bigger question of all these charities. Miles Howe has a big long piece this week that was published in Academic Journal about this sector and how much money and how many different Canadian groups are funding settlements and stuff like that. I actually haven't read it. I read a summary of it. There's an action alert about it. But it's a big long piece that they're working on for a long time. Just more and more evidence of how outrageous this whole charity sector is with subsidizing Israel. And the JNF is a victory. I think we're going to get some other victories. I think Masrachi Canada is going to lose its charitable status. That's what this piece that House publishes in large part about. And a couple other things. There's the dozens are going to go to the Canadians going to the march to Gaza. There was a press conference here this week in Montreal. I was going to go to it, and then I ran into the mayoral candidate Farada, who's the former liberal minister. So I went to her press conference, which was on the street, Saint Denis Street, and instead of going to the press conference for the people who are going to march to Gaza to try to embarrass the Egyptians. Also, the New Brunswick Federation of Labor calling on unions to refuse handling any weapons shipments bound for Israel after they adopted a resolution for an arms embargo. I'll leave it at that, and I'll make Laura a co-host, and I should be out by no later than like 7:10 at the absolute latest because I got something to do.
Okay, Nadia, can you unmute, please, and go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Eve. I just heard you saying what did the Egyptians do? I didn't get that. And also, I sent a tweet to Mark Carney about our shameful increase of the military budget. And I think everybody should do that. I don't understand why members of this group don't send, letters or tweets or whatever of indignation when it's due. I don't understand. I mean, what's the point of just chatting among us and then not doing anything about it? And I want you to tell me what did the Egyptians do that you find? What did they do?
Well, the first thing I think probably most people in this group, I mean, I know for myself, I send I sign lots of petitions and send lots of emails on different things, including like the CFPI did one on the Golden Dome. I mean, I think there probably should be another one. I think we did one on not that long ago. We done one on military spending. I can't remember. I think it'd be good to have another action alert in response to Carney's stuff. So, and I'm guessing most people on this foreign policy hour, do sign some of these and many others that are circulating. Um, Now, the Egyptians have been kind of complicit in Israel's, blockade of Gaza, right? They have some capacity, and I don't know exactly what the march to Gaza is doing, but my broad outlines of what I understand is happening is people are flying to Cairo and then trying to get to Rafah. That's my understanding. I don't. And I think there's even. I think I saw something about like a caravan that's already begun from like I might was it Algeria or Morocco? I don't. Yeah,
I think it's Tunisia.
was it Tunisia? Okay, yeah, so from Tunisia, yeah. So I that's I don't know. I think they are started. So that I think is it June 15th? It's all supposed to start in. I don't know exact dates, but I guess that's June 15th, pretty soon actually. But yeah, um, so I don't know how the Egyptian government's going to respond to this. I think this is a sensitive issue for the Egyptians. The Egyptians, I don't think, are on board with the Trump Riviera plan. They're not on board with the ethnic cleansing plan, and they haven't been from the get-go. But they have gone along, of course, with Israel's 20-year blockade and siege.
I don't know if you heard, Eve. I read something today. I can't remember where, showing that the Iranians have some kind of document that they apparently showed to the Egyptians that said that actually Israel is planning to overthrow Sisi's regime and take over part of Egypt or something. I don't know. I don't know if it's true, but I think I read it somewhere. Okay, go ahead, Christian.
I checked your YouTube channel for this, so I really have done my research, but I'm interested as to a video that came on my Facebook Reels feed, and it was of you confronting some, I'm gonna say politician, but she was screaming and weeping and saying, "Leave me alone," as she locked herself in her car. Who was that? And was that a politician or?
Yeah, that was Anna Ganey. Anna Ganey is a Liberal MP. Actually, she took over Mark Garneau's seat, and and she just played. I mean, this is, I mean, this was at Mark Carney's hotel, right by McGill. I went to there was a strike, the 2 day strike of Palestine strike at McGill, historic strike. After that, I'm there. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As I'm leaving, I see Carney's bus, like but block and a half from the Roddick Gates, the front of McGill, and so I go and just like hanging out there, and like I think I'd like miss Carney by like 30 seconds or a minute. I mean, really, it was quite close. There's people coming off the bus still, and so I'm hanging out there, and this is like the during the election, so it's like hyper security. Like Trudeau usually has RCMP with him, but this they had the snipers and stuff like that. So I'm just hanging out there, and so I walk over. I'm talking to these three McGill students a little bit further away than where I'd been positioned before, and I'm just talking to them, and I turn around, and someone's kind of like hurrying out of, and I look over and I recognize Anna Ganey. I'm not like all the RCMP, all of Carney's people knew I was there. And so I don't know that Anagini knew I was there, but I'd say it's like 98, 95% at least that she knew I was there. And I think that when I was kind of looking away, she basically tried to bolt. There's like RCMP everywhere. There was no threat to her in any sense whatsoever. She knew there was no threat. In the video that you see, she hits me twice. She knocks my camera off. I pieced together two videos because she turns my phone off, and then she does this whole like little cry victim thing. Now I have tried to attend press conferences. I'd gone to Anna Ganey's office during the election, maybe 2 weeks before that. Her campaign office was just volunteers or staff working. And there's all kinds of people in her riding who've been constantly raising up house. She's like she's a backbencher, but she was the former head of the Liberal Party. And of course, her dad's Bob Gainey, the famous hockey player, and she just did. I mean, it was really like what she did was totally outrageous. Now, I got people criticizing me. Like there was people who there was a whole bunch of people kind of saying this was sexist basically. I wrote a big long piece in response to Matthew Bethren's who went at me hard for this. I mean, it was just his piece was, you can read the long piece I wrote about it. It's really his position, in my opinion, was totally scandalous. But yeah, that was Anna Ganey, and then actually just this week I didn't post about it, but I went to the at her office. About 20 people. They did a die-in at her office. I got there a bit late because I had to pick up Joshua from school, but they did a die-in and they tried to bring in again. The doors locked and whatever. So people were saying, "Oh, this is not the right place." Like, first of all, it was Mark Carney's hotel. She was leaving a political. I mean, it wasn't like she wasn't out for dinner, and it was like a political thing. I had no idea she was there. I just recognized her as I turned around. But she did a whole like this cry victim thing that's just embarrassing considering she's backing the slaughter of she had criticized her own party. She criticized the ceasefire resolution that Canada passed, that Trudeau passed. She was one of 4 or 5 Liberal MPs that criticized it. So she's aligned with she's not quite as bad as Anthony Housefather or Marco Mendocino, but she's one step after that in terms of being, repeatedly criticizing McGill, repeatedly criticizing the Liberals for, not being genocidal enough.
Okay, we have two more questions, Yuri and Fiona. Do you have time to take two more?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Yuri.
Thanks. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, E, for all you do. All I can say is F the Liberal Party and their stupid crocodile tears in the West and the fake left that acts as their unpaid lawyer. But by the way, the organization that you mentioned, the right-wing organization that you mentioned, which tries to get all the center rights and now even the far right together, that Stephen Harper is chairman of. It's the International Democracy Union. It's funny. I'm actually doing a lot of research on them and similar organizations. But a question I wanted to ask you is, I'm curious what your response to the former foreign minister of the German SPD Green Party coalition government with the Liberal Party. She's a German Green, Annalena Baerbock. She's been appointed president of the UN General Assembly. And of course, her CV includes wonderful things like supporting the Western proxy war in Ukraine, supporting the Islamic fascist takeover of Syria, and the ongoing support of Israel's genocide, and suppressing in Germany voices critical of Israel. I'm curious your response on that. And have there been any Canadian leftist action in mobilizing and trying to free Pedro Castillo of Peru and Imran Khan of Pakistan? Curious here. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how that the Secretary General position. No, so Baraga didn't get. What does she become? She becomes the head of the assembly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's not the. I don't know how that's chosen exactly. To be honest, I assume it's a vote, but it's obviously
It's a vote.
it's a bad it's a bad development because she's a serious she was a serious genocide supporter and a serious NATO person. I don't know how that exactly happens politically. With regards to Castillo, no, not much. There was some protests, right after the coup, but I haven't seen much since. I was one here in Montreal. It was like not big, but it was 150 maybe or something like that. In a win, I think it was a winter, I believe, if I remember correctly. In terms of Imran Khan, I know I met with when I was in Waterloo. I met with someone from the came out to the event, Pakistani community who was working on that. And there was some. Then I looked into it a bit at the time. There was some petitions, but I don't not much, not much.
Okay, Fiona, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment regarding the march from Cairo to Rafah. I regularly rally twice a month with a small group of mostly Muslims in Niagara Falls, like right opposite Niagara Falls, many of whom are Egyptians, and some of them were really very active in pro-democracy movements in Egypt, and so are not in any position to return to Egypt. But I just wanted to say that they are very, very encouraged by that march to Cairo. It seems to be seen by pro-Palestinian Muslims here as the chance for Muslims, because pro-Palestinian Muslims, of course, are tremendously embarrassed by their own country's positions, that they're not supporting Palestine. So those who are pro-Palestine are really, really very encouraged by this march and the numbers who seem to be joining it, and also that other convoy which already started in Tunisia and is going across the very top of Africa, hoping to meet the march from Cairo people outside Rafah. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just wanted to remind people that Muslims in Canada, I think, are very silenced for a whole lot of reasons. One of which is sheer fear and intimidation and not wanting to stand up, but that there are a lot who are very much of the same mind as us and are really, really hoping that this is going to focus attention on the fact that that Muslims around the world really very, very much want to see a free Palestine.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Fiona. I just wanted to say, Lynn, I'm sorry, give you a chance to respond to that, but then
No,
Lynn,
I think it was well said.
yeah, I'm following it too, Fiona. So Lynn has a question. You want to make that the last question?
Sure, yeah, quick.
Okay, go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, I just went to a hostage intimate discussion at the JCC today, and a week ago I was on the march. We do the march. I go behind the Run for Your Lives thing, and then last Sunday there was the fire attack in Boulder, Colorado, and I was 15 feet from that. So, but I like to engage. I'm the only one that does this for the Palestinian presence on that march, and they don't like it much, but I march behind them a bit, and so I was right close when that fire thing happened. But
Has there been anything new on that you can report quickly?
oh, there was a huge gathering. The Jewish festival is every Sunday, this a week from Sunday. So it was like, um, I mean, there was a big press conference with all the legislators and Jared Polis and the governor and all in front of the courthouse. And then later that day, there was a big thing at JCC, and then this Sunday, there was the Jewish festival got basically taken over. Like it was just, you were packed in like you couldn't move. I couldn't take my bike in there. It's like crazy. But I like to go because I like the gypsy dancing, klezmer music and stuff. But I couldn't get there in time, and so it was just kind of crazy. But this hostage, um, this guy that spoke, his brother-in-law is a hostage, and he was talking about the Haredi and um, and that their refusal to be in the military, the conscription. The Haredi are the ultra Orthodox. They aren't Zionist per se, are they, Eve? Because they don't want the land of Israel. They don't care about that. They don't want, they're
Well,
not,
my understanding is they are increasingly Zionist in practice, whether there's a certain
whether,
degree of ideological ambivalence, in practice they are. But yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, now
But in
Eve
any
has
case,
an engagement, Lynn,
Yeah,
so your question?
I should go.
the question was, what if they are able to leave the parliament? The Supreme Court is forcing them to, is enforcing this required conscription, but they're not agreeing to it. But what if they could just leave the parliament and and then have new elections and have a more moderate?
Yeah, well, I think that seems like a real possibility. I haven't followed those internal Israeli politics close enough, but that's from what I've seen, that looks like that might be happening. So,
Okay, Eve, we'll let you go. We know you have an engagement now, but
yeah, everyone.